Please enjoy this feature presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network. This program is rated for all audiences.
The World According to Elmer is sponsored by CrookedRiverRadio.com. Crooked River Radio is an internet radio station that is live 24/7 playing top 40 hits from the 60s through the 80s. You can find us on Live 365, Simple Radio, Roku, Radio Garden, and even Alexa, as well as our website. Come on and join us on the Crooked River. Welcome aboard. We're headed for the World According to Elmer, with hosts Gerry Sorenson and Pat Morrow. Don't worry, you'll enjoy it there. Better buckle in and enjoy the ride. Here come our hosts now.
Well, good evening, everyone. We're glad to have you here on the World According to Elmer on Crooked River Radio. I'm Gerry Sorenson, Kilo Golf 8, Radio Yankee. And our Elmer is with us tonight, Pat Morrow. He is Nobody Ate Oscar's Quirky Pickles. N8OQP is with us this evening. He is our Elmer. Pat, how are you?
Nobody ate Old Quaint Patrick.
That was the quickest thing I could come up with. It's kind of like field day. If you've never participated in a field day, you need to get on the air for field day to hear everybody's what do they call that? The International Phonetic Alphabet or something like that. Yep. I don't know the technical name for it, but everybody has their own. Field day last year, I heard a lady that wanted to use a phonetic name for D, which is Delta, actually, and she used Doritos. And I have to tell you, Pat, I fell off the chair in that little trailer we were in. I was on the floor laughing.
Well, there was one. There's one that my club uses that is it's a little sexist, but what the heck, you know?
What the heck?
It's we go by it's Whiskey 8 Victor Papa Victor, W8VPV, is the actual call sign. Well, a lot of times people can't hear Victor, so it's Very Pretty Virgin.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, VPV, Very Pretty Virgin.
Like
and you'd be surprised at how many people hear that over the other one.
You got to be on the air for field day. You will hear things that you won't hear anywhere else ever. Trust me.
That's about it.
It's been an interesting week. I had a vacation this week, or I should have. It's good to be back after spending the week at the Cleveland Clinic. For what I paid for that, I could have gone around the world.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Could have just picked anywhere I wanted, and it wasn't quite as nice as spending the week at the Bahamas, but it was nice that they took care of me. So feeling good now, though. So
that's great. That's the big thing. We got to get you back.
There's been a lot of sickness going around. I was a little bit surprised at the emergency room. The ERs, at least around here, we live in Ohio, folks. There's people from all over the world watch this show. We're in Northeast Ohio, and the emergency rooms right now are very full, and it takes a long time to get seen. So, God bless everybody that works in those ERs. They do a fantastic job, and we appreciate them.
Yep.
Hey, it might surprise you. While I was resting in the Cleveland Clinic, I got some QSL cards.
No, there's no way. They didn't know you were in there. No way, no how. I don't believe a word.
And I got the card of all cards. I'm going to show it to you here in a second. First of all, this is K2CWM. Thank you very much. What I like about this card is this is an old time card. It's fashioned after a 1930s, 1940s card. And I like these. I have one like this. It's not exactly like this. Let me get one of mine here. This is the one I got from K2CWM. This is mine. Now, these are they're kind of throwback cards, and I like those. So it was nice to get his card this week. Nice CW contact, and he lives over in Jersey, New Jersey. And I didn't know there were any people that lived in Rhode Island, but apparently there are, and some of them are ham radio operators, because I got this nice card from Whiskey 1 Delta Hotel, and a nice, beautiful color card. I like these color cards when they come in. And this is just a beautiful picture of Rhode Island. I've never been to Rhode Island. It must be just a fantastic state as far as scenery is concerned, because every card I've gotten from Rhode Island is beautiful like that. And of course, the great state of Texas. Woohoo! Gotta have Texas. God bless Texas. KG5 and GGI. And there he is. He's in, where is he at? He's in Sanger, Texas, which is to the north and to the east in Texas there. Good to get your card. He says, let's do it again sometime. That would suit me just fine. This one was not a long contact at all. This was one of the contacts during Ohio's QSO party. And this was a quickie over to Illinois. And this gentleman says that he is 20 miles to the south and to the west of Chicago. Just stay out of Chicago, my friend. There are a lot of people right now that bad things going on in Chicago. That's all I'll say about that. But this is the card of all cards here. Well, I put those away. It finally came in, and this is the end of the bunch right here. Here is K2I.
All right.
This was the very last card. This is the one I told you that I was waiting on. This is the last of the 13 colonies cards. And of course, 13 colonies was over July 4th. So that tells you how long it took to get this card. I'm going to set this one aside, and I'll go through the entire group here, if you can see them. This is K2A. Now you're going to notice a running theme here. All of these are the tall ships. Here is B. K2B, trying to get it to where the glare is not on it. Here is K2C, K2D. That's a beautiful card. That's probably my favorite. K2E, got my fingers in the way there. Here is F, K2F, K2G, another nice card. K2H. Now I'm going to throw in again K2I, which just came. This is the final card. This is the one I was waiting on. So HI, K2J. We're getting there, Pat. K2K. Kilo 2 kilo right here. K2L. This is kind of a cool card. It was a departure. It's not the tall ship, but we're sitting out on the beach right now. Reminds me of that commercial on TV where they have the beach with the palm tree and the Christmas lights. Do you see that one do you like that one?
Yeah, every once in a while.
Yeah, I think it's a beer commercial or something. But that's K2L. This is the card from K2M, and this wraps up the regular stations. Now, there were 3 bonus stations. WM3 Penn. This station was in Pennsylvania. And this is the Great Britain station, which is kind of funny when you think about it. So what did they pick? They picked the Battle of New York, which was probably the British's greatest victory in the Revolutionary War, or the War for Independence, if you'd like to call it that. And there was a station, a bonus station in France, which I did not get. I made a clean sweep of the regular stations, and but the France one, it evaded me this year, but I'll get it next year. But I'm going to take those and put those in a nice frame. Plus, it came with a certificate, which I think I showed you a few weeks back.
Yeah.
And that one was pretty cool. So I did get this card. This is not a QSL card this week, but this was a card that was sent to me from a gentleman that watches our show. And he has printed up some technician study cards, or what would you call them? Flashcards.
Flashcards, yeah.
Call them in school. And so if you write to, or if you go on the internet to technician, for technician license, of course. Let me get my glasses here because the printing is very small and I'm very old. Technician.kilo 4 Uniform Sierra Delta. So technician period or dot K4 USD.org. If you go to that website, he will be only too happy, free of charge, to send you a set of flashcards for the technician's license. So if you know somebody that wants to become a ham operator and they're looking for a way to study and they need some help, there's a resource for you. So take advantage of free resources. $3.99 is the bomb. So
Not bad.
it's all good. One of the things that we have coming up that we're going to talk about on tonight's show are ham fests. And ham fests are something that almost disappeared in 2020. It was a bad year for ham fests. But ham fests are important, and they serve a purpose in ham radio. Ham fests are like a gathering. There are people that bring all different sorts of secondhand gear. Some of it is junk. Some of it is very valuable. Some of it are things that you won't find anywhere else. But it serves a purpose. People come to these ham fests and they swap and they trade and they buy things and they go home with treasures that perhaps they wouldn't find anywhere else. And one of the things that I noticed is that in that period in 2020 where we had no ham fests, it seemed like, well, and that coupled with the fact that we were having trouble getting new gear. Remember, we went for a stretch there. You and I talked about it in 2020, where you couldn't get a new radio to save your life. I mean, you go online, they were there, but they were back ordered. Everything was back ordered. Well, the price of used gear, like on Fleabay and some of those websites, got outrageous. Some of what they were asking for some of the junk, frankly, on eBay was more than you would pay for a new radio. They were taking $70 Chinese radios and marking them up to $200 or $300, and people were paying that price because brand new hams wanted to get a radio and they couldn't get a radio. And so I learned through that experience that ham fests serve a great purpose. They're an equalizer, and what they tend to do is they tend to hold the cost down on used gear. You know, when ham fests are taking place like they are now again, they're in full swing again, the price on all that stuff has come down now to where it belongs, to where it should have been all along. But people, of course, free enterprise, people will take advantage when there's more of a demand than there is a supply. And so it's kind of exciting to see the ham fest coming back, and we've got some great ones coming up here in Ohio that I'll talk about in just a few minutes on the program. But we've got a couple of videos tonight, Pat. One of them is just a video about ham fests, and the other one is a gentleman that sat down and he did a short video on mistakes that people make at ham fests. Do you have any particular ham fests before we go to one of the videos, Pat, that stands out in your mind as a favorite of yours that you went to?
Of course, Chicago Falls Amateur Radio Club's ham fest. That's probably the one I've been at the most.
I wonder why that one would be a favorite of yours, Pat.
That we're actually scheduled for April 9th of next year now. We've started the preparations. We've rented a hall. Hopefully, COVID's not going to attack us again.
Yeah, but, I hope not either. What hall are you going to rent?
It'll be the Emedios down there in Chicago Falls, where we usually are. We decided that we'd go back there at least one more year. Emedia's been pretty good with us, except for the COVID thing. He kept our deposit, which we won't go into. But
I'm sorry, it's not funny, but
it was kind of unfair. But
that is just kind of the nature of the beast for last year, wasn't it?
That was about it. But anyway, the fest itself, it's a beautiful room. We actually rent the other side of a wedding reception hall.
Okay.
And it plenty of space. There's like 21,000 square feet, something like that. Big place. And we can do some outside, but most of the time the weather's not good enough to really do an outside fest like that.
That's one of the things in Ohio you got to be careful of. Anytime you plan something outside, things here are subject to change.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And you know what? Electronic gear doesn't do well outside in the rain.
This is true, and you got to have a nice, especially in the springtime like that. My other favorite, though, got to be Dayton.
Dayton. Everybody talks about Dayton. I've never been.
Dayton is a strange animal, and it's huge. It used to be at the Harris Center down in Dayton itself, but they ended up moving it to. They ended up moving it towards where that big tornado was back in the 70s.
Oh, okay.
that I can't think of the name of the town.
You're not talking about Xenia.
Xenia, yeah.
Yeah,
They're
that was
closer.
like everybody in the world knew about that tornado. That was horrible.
They're a little closer to Xenia, and I haven't been out there yet for that one, but Dayton as a whole it's a community getting together and having a blast.
Is that right?
It's 4 days. I think it's 4 days. It runs Thursday through Sunday, and vendors are allowed to come in Wednesday afternoon, and the thing actually starts Wednesday for all intents and purposes. You go in there, and you need somebody like you and I would need a rocking chair to ride through it, because it's a huge place. It covers about a mile.
Wow.
And there was outside and there's inside. You actually have little demonstrations and shows that are going on in some of the buildings that are there. It's like a big convention, and it's one of those things that if you're ham, and that Dayton or even the hamcation down in Florida needs to be on your bucket list, because those are two of the biggest hamventions that there are. And to me, it was just a natural. I had to go down there to see what it was, and I ended up buying radios and antenna analyzers and everything else. So I was come back a little poorer, but what the heck, had fun. I still got some of the equipment.
The one that we'll talk about that's coming up here on October 31st is the one at the Canton Akron Airport. And I went to that one last year, and it was a smaller ham fest, but at least it took place in 2020. It didn't cancel out like a lot of them did, but it was an outdoor ham fest, and that was good because, still the COVID thing was going on. But I came home with a beautiful multimeter. This was a multimeter I've told you about that actually originated in Akron at a place called Olson, but it's got a big analog dial on it, and it's one of the old school.
Olson Electronics, my favorite place.
You just can't get that kind of stuff anywhere anymore. And that's the beauty of the Hamfest. You'll see things there that you just can't pick up anywhere else. Now, you buyer beware at Hamfest.
And that's exactly right. I was just going to point that out. Don't go there and not be able to if you're spending a lot of money on something, make them fire it up and show you that it works, or
yes.
don't purchase. That's
the other thing is, I think people tend to come home with things that perhaps they would not buy if they were thinking clearly. It's like an auction. An auction, you can take something that has a value of maybe, let's say, I don't know, $200. And by the time they get done selling it, they got $800 out of that thing. You look at that and you scratch your head and you think, you could have had a brand new one of those for $200 less. And you wonder where that thinking comes from. Well, it's the excitement of the moment. And
yep.
I think it gets to people at these types of things if you're not careful.
Yep. There is another event coming up I would like to mention here. Tomorrow night, I don't know if you remember this from past shows, but tomorrow starting at 4:30 in the afternoon, the Cuyahoga Falls Amateur Radio Club is sponsoring Summit Parks on the Air, which is, we're calling it CFARC to the Field, CTTF. And what it's going to be, there's a bunch of Falls people that are going to go activate parks.
Okay.
And I got to kill something here.
How many parks are you guys going to activate?
The last I saw, it's probably going to be 11 or 12, provided we can set up with no weather issues or anything like that. There's 18. I think there's 18 parks in Summit County, and the last I saw, there's going to be at least 10 or 12 activations. I'm going to have actually myself be in Goodyear, and
by the Akron Fulton Airport.
Yeah, I'll be in the Goodyear Park. It's down there off of Newton, and at least for part of it. I don't know how long I'm going to stay out there.
I have to come by and visit you, Pat.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give me a call. But I should be out there from about 4:30 on is when it starts. We'll be.
Are you going to post what frequencies, or how is this going to work?
If you look on the Cuyahoga Falls Amateur Radio Club's new website, cfarc.org, there's a place on there that says information for CTTF, and that gives you. There's a little tiny URL presentation there that talks about it, and it gives you all the forms to fill out and everything like that.
Okay, so that's C-F-A-R-C, C-FARC. I want to go back through that slowly because that really goes fast on the radio. cfarc.org.
O-R-G, C-F-A-R-C.org. And
well, that's good. We'll look that up, and hopefully I'll be able to swing out by and see you there at Goodyear. That'd be awesome.
Give me a call if you're coming out.
I will.
And we will talk about it.
Let's roll one of our videos today about ham. Why don't we just roll the general video, if you have it, not the one about the things to avoid. We'll come back and talk about that in just a few minutes, because that's probably the most important thing we'll talk about tonight as we look towards Hamfest.
You're talking about the one that's titled Hamfest?
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and roll it and see what we got here.
Let's give a roll. We'll be back on the other side of this. You're listening to The World According to Elmer on Crooked River Radio.
River Radio.
Hi everybody, Daniel here from Basement Tech. So I've mentioned in a few videos the various sources I use to get the materials for my projects. And one of those was the Hamfest. As I briefly mentioned those couple of times, the Hamfest is electronics and computer swap fest, usually sponsored by ham radio clubs as fundraisers. You can find a place to search for those on a website related to ham radio called arrl.org. I'll put it in the comments at the bottom of the page. There you can search on your state and see when they occur. They usually occur during the nice weather, but there are a few in the winter, and the mother of all Hamfest is in Dayton, Ohio in early May. So I went to a Hamfest this last weekend and had a lot of success that I want to share with you. Mostly to just kind of calibrate you on the things you can get and the prices that you typically pay. So starting kind of at the bottom with some of the smaller items, you know, a switch like this. I do always find myself needing big red switches, either for whimsical things like I had one that opened the garage door, or I may use this in the surveillance project for a panic button or something like that. This is an industrial controls type switch. It has 2 contacts and is lit from the bottom with an LED light, a bayonet type light. So I paid $2 for this. I'm sure it cost, I don't know, in real terms, in real life, maybe $10 or something. So that was pretty good, I thought. Not the best bargain of the day, however. Last time I talked about getting a camera for $1, or maybe it was $2. That was a 720p camera. This one is 1080p, completely functional, and I paid $5 for this one. I thought that was a pretty good bargain, since they typically cost, what, $40, $50, $30, something like that. Way less, or sorry, way more than $5. I have a Motorola radio that I've converted to ham radio use, but the little volume knob, the volume control is scratchy, and I was seeking this little board here, and really hard to find. This was $1 in somebody's junk box. That's very typical when people get tired of moving their stuff from one place to the other. They'll just throw it for $1, excuse me, or even sometimes free. Rather than just throw it in the trash, they'd rather recycle it to somebody else in the hobby. So that's going to help me fix my Motorola radio for $1. I have used these in the past. It's a USB external sound card. Pretty old, I admit, and sometimes drivers are hard to come by, but Linux systems will recognize it, and it provides way better audio, especially for a laptop, than the typical built-in audio cards. $1. So I thought that was pretty good. Not necessarily something I went there to get, but you know, as you look around, you get ideas, which I think is part of the fun as well. I have a meter that was in need of a fancy yellow case instead of the black one that it's in. $1 in somebody's $1 box. Now I'm starting to get to some of the things that are a bit more interesting. This one was $10. I'm just going to show you the connectors, give you 2 seconds to think about what it is. Those are antenna connectors for over-the-air antennas, and that's an Ethernet connector. So this makes television, broadcast television, available on my local network, so I can watch it on any TV, any computer in the house. I thought that was fun and interesting for $10. Again, not something I was interested in or knew I was going to buy, but when I saw it, I kind of had to have it. Finally, two other items, which I think were sort of the buys of the day. I'll start here at this one. I do some electrical work once in a while, project-wise, or in my son's shop, zimknives.com, his knife shop, and once in a while I need to measure currents. This is a device called a amp probe, and it's just very popular among electricians. I've never seen the actual whole kit with all of the accessories. This one measures voltage to 600 volts, current to 300 amps. It even has a way to measure resistance and the phasing of different things. I got that whole kit for $10, completely functional. I don't know what it would have cost new. It's a bit old, you can see. Things don't come in fancy leather cases anymore. Completely functional though, and it's going to be great for the once in a while things I need to do measuring big currents, like with grinder motors and such. So finally, this item in the middle. I was in need of a new radio for my car. Buying new or buying used is always the question, but this one I think was such a bargain I kind of had to pick it up. This is the ICOM. I'll show you on the label so you can see it for sure. The ICOM IC208H. I believe this came out about 10 years ago and sold for in the low 300s, 329 kind of dollars. For those of you who aren't hams, you can just note the price and the fact that I actually paid only $50 for this. Completely functional. I asked the guy if it worked and he said yes. I have done some bench testing and it does indeed, but this is a major point I want to make about Hamfest. There are no warranties for anything that you buy, so you have to trust your seller and or get some kind of contact information. So if you buy a higher priced item like this one, you have some recourse if it doesn't work, especially if they claim that it does. So definitely at Hamfest, it's buyer beware. I've never purchased anything more used than say this $50 item or such, but that's quite a bargain. I think the radio is completely functional, and I'll use it regularly for only $50. It really filled a need. I was planning to buy a new radio, so I won't have to do that. I wanted to show a few pictures here at the end of the Hamfest itself. You typically pay $5 to $10 maximum to get in, and that's part of the fundraising for the clubs. But also, if you're going to be a seller, some Hamfests are free for selling. Like this one, you just drive your car up and unload your goods and start selling. Others do charge, say, $10 for a table, especially if it's an indoor venue where the club has to rent some space in order to have the event, like a Hamfest in the winter. So to be a seller ranges from $5 to say $15. To be a buyer, it's usually $5 or $6 or $7. So anyway, hope you got a good idea of what Hamfests are all about. If you like the video, like it. If you really like, subscribe to the channel and you'll see things like this and or project activity here in the basement.
Well, there you go. Pat, what do you think about his buys? How did he do?
Not too bad. He's when you go to Hamfest, the things you got to realize, especially, you've got a lot of people that don't have a lot of money that are looking for bargains, and I can prove this, what I'm about to say here, by something that happened to me when I first went to my first Hamfest. And that is, one man's junk is another man's treasure.
I've heard that.
And the way I prove that, back in about 1992, I stumbled across the computer system that was in Terex up there in Stowe.
Okay.
Stowe Hudson border. This thing was mammoth. It had disc carts that I couldn't get in my truck, but it had a ton of stuff that we towed it out 3 van loads full of stuff out of there.
Wow.
A woman was just wanting to get rid of it. I ended up giving her $25 for it because I felt bad I was taking it. And so I hauled it all home, put it in the garage, and it was at our Cog Falls Hamfest was the next morning, or about a week away. So I put the first load in the truck, in the van, and I went up and put it all out on the table. And I was figuring if any of this stuff is left, it's going to go in the trash. I had a printer left, an old dot matrix printer, out of all that junk that I took up there. I made a killing. I think I hit close to $600, and it was all just junk. It was junk. So I couldn't believe that one. So we went out to Portage County, to the Portage County one. I did the same thing there. I ended up selling all 3 truckloads of that stuff. I probably made $1,800 off of that whole mess.
One man's junk is another man's treasure.
That's exactly right. And that's what's at these hamfests. A lot of guys, I had mainframes that were like that big, you know?
Yeah.
And they stood about as high as a desk. Just crammed full of resistors and capacitors and all that. And I had these 2 guys come by that looked like they were old radio crafters. And they looked at that stuff and went, wow. And I ended up selling this both. I had like 3 of them. They bought all 3 of them off of me. There was no way they were going to repair them. They were taking them home to scrap them. And get all
exactly.
The junk. They were taking them to get the resistors and capacitors and everything out of them.
Well, the gentleman it was interesting to hear the gentleman on the video talk, because as he talked, you saw the wheels turning in his head, and he was taking these pieces of different gear and whatnot and doing the same thing you're talking about. You know, for somebody else looks at a piece and they say, oh, that's just a part from an old computer. But to a ham radio operator that works on old radios, he's looking for analog resistors and capacitors and all this stuff all the time.
And that's a lot of what you get at these hamfests. And if a lot of times, especially back over the past several years, a lot of them used to brand themselves as hamfests and computer shows. The reason they did that was because the computers started showing up at these fests. If you had a junk hard drive, wouldn't turn, you could sell that thing for $10. I've done it. I had 256 meg of RAM. The sticks, I sold those things like they were hotcakes. $5 a piece, and out the door as soon as they hit the table. Incredible stuff. And
one of the things I was going to always buy for my handy talkies is I wanted these little microphones that clip on, they clip onto your lapel. And those things are about anywhere from $10 to $50 on Amazon or anywhere you go. And they're more than that in the radio stores. And I went out to this Hamfest last year that I was telling you about, the one at the airport. And in addition to my Olson multimeter, this guy had a box of those microphones, and he had to have 100 of them. And they were from all different brands. And I saw a Kenwood that fit my radio, and he wanted $1 for it.
Take it away.
There you go.
Doggone right.
So you got to keep your eyes open. But yeah, it's the ability not to necessarily see the piece you're getting, but what you can use that piece for. That's insightful.
The one thing that I found is if you're the seller, if you own the stuff, you need to stick with your table. And you're going to get the most out of it that way. You can't, a lot of times I get the urge to take and hand it off to somebody. It's, oh, well, here, if you can sell this, I'll give you $20. And sometimes it works out so okay, sometimes it don't. I went a whole Hamfest. I had an old Kenwood that I wanted $350 for. I ended up taking $250 for it after the show, just because I wanted to get rid of it and didn't want it sitting around here.
Yeah.
But, if I would have been able to stay there and stay on top of it, I probably would have sold it.
Well, let me say this too. You have to decide in your mind how much you're willing to invest in this part. There was a guy that was selling a power supply, up at the Hamfest at the airport. But he told me right up front, he said, now this supply is kind of funny. The voltage goes up, it goes down, and it doesn't behave the way that a normal power supply is supposed to behave. Be aware of that if you're going to buy it. And he had a very attractive price on it. Now, if I had had the time or the energy or the inclination to sit down and fool with the thing, and I would have to figure there's some type of rectifier.
You're probably something like that, something with a voltage drop, and you're probably looking at a regulator.
Exactly.
There's usually two regulators in a power supply like that.
So if you're willing to take the time and invest the time, then it's worth it to you. If you're not willing to put that time in, take a pass.
Yep.
Because you're just taking home trouble. And typically, like you said earlier, it's buyer beware. Typically, if you're not willing to invest your time in it and you have to take it to somebody else to repair it, you're going to have more in the piece than if you had just gone out and bought a new supply.
Yeah.
So you got to think about that too. In fact, we've got a good video on mistakes that you can make at Hamfest and how to avoid those mistakes. So Pat, let's go ahead and roll that now if we can.
All right, we're ready when you are.
Okay, you guys are listening to The World According to Elmer on Crooked River Radio, and we'll be back on the other side of this video on the things that you should not do.
Hi everybody, this is Tim N2LCJ, and today I'd like to give you 5 tips on making purchases at a Hamfest. Now, we're not in Hamfest season right yet, but the Winter Hamfest is just around the corner, and maybe using my tips you'll help to make a few good purchase decisions and avoid a few mistakes. Now, we all see radios all shined up and repainted, and of course they have the Radio Museum printouts highlighted, and recent eBay auctions with the price highlighted.
Look at that radio.
Or the price it's selling for. Is it something you want to own? Tip number 1. If you buy something broken, make sure that either you can fix it, you know somebody that can fix it, or it can be fixed. Good example of that are things like broken Chinese radios like TYTs, Baofengs, things like that. It's probably not worth your time, especially when you consider that you're not saving that much money when you're buying a radio that sells $60 brand new. Tip number 2, make sure it's usable on today's bands. Now, I made a lot of mistakes with 2-meter AM gear. 2-meter AM gear I thought was really cool, and I had a lot of fun restoring it, and I got it on the air, and I could talk to absolutely nobody. Another mistake you can make is buying military gear, thinking that you can use it on the ham bands. And I can tell you from experience, there is almost nothing that you can buy that is mil-spec that you can use on today's ham bands. Either it is FCC non-compliant, too wide-banded, wrong mode, whatever. If you think it looks cool, that's great, but you're going to go through a lot of headaches trying to use it anywhere. Shortwave radios are another thing. There's really not that much to listen to on the shortwave bands anymore. Of course, you can tune into the ham bands, but unless you like a lot of religious programming and you do some AM DXing, that's the Shack Cat. You better shut up. Shut up! The only other things you're going to hear are Radio Havana, Cuba, and China Radio International. So it's fun for a short period of time. Number 3, don't pay eBay prices. Now, this can work your way in both directions. Those of you that know the prices of ham gear know that there's been a lot of fluctuation. For example, you take like your Heathkit AT1 CW transmitter, first one Heathkit made. I remember when you get these things at Hamfests for $10. Now they're commanding a premium buck on eBay. Some HF radios are tanking in value. Your Tempo ones, broken Kenwoods. It was a poor guy that was trying to sell a TS520 at 5 different Hamfests, and it needed all kinds of work, and he wanted, I think, $350. he's not going to get it. Number 4, avoid used antennas unless you're an antenna expert. I know this firsthand. I've bought used antennas in the past, and when you go through all the work of putting it up, you're saving yourself some money, but you're going to end up with something that's basically a dummy load. If you know the seller, that can be a good thing to buy a used antenna, so one that's lightly used. But it's been my experience that for what antennas sell for, it's generally not worth it. And finally, tip number 5, if you really think it's cool and you have the money, ignore points 1 through 4, because that's what this is all about, having fun. Here's an example of that. I don't know how far off camera it is, but this is what's called a Conrad monitor receiver. This was built in the Cold War days to monitor the civil defense frequencies. It was required that every transmitter station had one of these. Now, it's got crystals for those frequencies and a few different crystals. So I paid $30 and for it. I thought, that'd be great if I could grind the crystals a little bit, get them to use on AM standard radio frequencies and use it as an AM radio. How neat, right? Well, after I had to end up spending a few bucks on some specialty tubes that it had, after I ended up having to spend $15 on a manual that had schematics and all kinds of stuff on it, and even trying to figure out how to work the stupid thing, it still doesn't work. I'll get to it one of these days. But this is an immortal sin. And I'm sure that a lot of you have racks of gear just like this that you like to look at. But if you're looking for something to use, be smart with your Hamfest purchases this season. This is N2LCJ, saying 7 threes.
There are some very good suggestions that he just made. What stood out about the things that he said to you, Pat?
Very little. I was admiring that radio in the background there. It almost looks like it's either a Heath kit or it's I thought it may be a Collins, but I don't. Collins made a similar radio to that, but I don't think it had the green face.
What about his piece of civil defense gear that he has in front of him?
Personally, I wouldn't waste the money.
I drove past a school the other day, Pat, and it still has the civil defense sign on the side.
I believe it.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. Now, all the young people are watching the show are going, what are you talking about? That was a big deal back in the day. And all of your AM radios had this little emblem every so often on the dial. And those were your civil defense frequencies that you would tune to if the nuclear bombs were incoming.
That was
and
back.
That's what that was all about.
That was probably back when that all started. In fact, do you know, I'm going to give you a little history here. Do you know that your National Weather Service alarms actually were civil defense back in, that started in 1958 or 9?
I did not know that.
That used to be the, I think it was called EBS, Emergency Broadcast System.
The EBS. Well, when I was in commercial radio, Pat, one of the things that we had to do weekly is we had to do EBS announcements on all of the stations that I worked at anyway. And I still have that script memorized, and we would have to break away from our regular programming, and we would have to do a EBS test each and every week. And then that would have to be put in the log that we had done that test.
It usually started out, this is a test of the emergency broadcast system.
That's right. This is only a test. The broadcasters of your area, in voluntary cooperation with the state, local, national authorities, have developed this system to keep you informed in the event of an emergency. And it goes on and on.
If this were an emergency, you would be directed to tune to your local broadcast, whatever. I don't remember exactly how that went.
That was a big deal, and that's all been replaced and updated now. But but I understand what he's saying, and that was a cool piece to have, and it probably is not very practical. One of the other things that he mentioned, he talked about the military radios, and that you will always see military gear at every Hamfest. But he's right. It's hard to get up and running. Now, there are some people that are expert at it, especially these guys that were in the Navy or what have you in World War II. and they're getting to be, they're up there in years now. But these gentlemen, that was the gear that they remembered. That gear was in the bombers. That gear was also in Jeeps and tanks and everything else. And they remember this gear fondly. That was the gear that saved their life. And some of that, especially after World War II ended, that stuff found its way back home. And there are a lot of men that use that gear for years and years, and they use that as their ham shack gear. But he's right. The bands have changed and things have changed, and a lot of that doesn't mesh up anymore with what we're currently allowed to do.
Yep. The other thing that got me about that back then was they always told you that you would be directed to your local emergency broadcast station, and then the other stations would go off the air. Do you know why that was?
No, that I do not know.
That was because they figured that if the things were launched by a missile, the missiles would probably home in on the radio signals from these stations, and that's how they would be directed to where the targets were. Fact,
well, if you were a broadcast announcer, you would want to get out of Dodge then.
That's an actual fact. And that all happened and was caused pretty much by the Bay of Pigs thing in Cuba when Russia tried to put missiles over on the Cuban soil.
Now we're
a little history lesson there.
Yeah. Well, history is part and parcel to ham radio, and ham radio is part of history too. So all of the broadcast stations back in the day were all amateur stations. In fact, professional broadcasting grew out of what is today ham radio, out of the amateur side. Everything was amateur in 1925.
I always thought it's amusing how some of this stuff really evolved. I mean, even Skywarn coming out of the Second World War, because it was protecting the ammo dumps and that. It's amazing how it evolved. Now it's instead of watching ammo dumps, you're watching out for tornadoes.
Yeah, still protecting the public.
Yep.
The other thing that he said that I think you should take to heart, and I almost made this mistake once, and the only reason that I didn't make this mistake is because I knew this particular antenna. Is I saw an antenna at a very attractive price at a ham fest, and I almost bought it. And it's a nice vertical, and I looked at it and I looked at all the pieces, and only because I knew that antenna, I knew that it was missing a piece, and it would have cost more to obtain the piece that was missing than it would to, purchase another antenna. And so if you had bought that antenna, you'd have been very disappointed when you took the thing home and tried to put it together and found out that one of the main pieces to the antenna was missing.
Well, if they have the book there, you can always go by what the parts count in the book. But as far as antenna-wise, I've actually made mistakes before when I've sold antennas like that. In fact, I had an old high gain that I sold it, and 2 months later I found the top hat for it.
Oh no!
Poor guy. I don't know who I sold it to.
Yeah, okay. So you had no record of who to go back to and send it to.
That's the thing about Hamfest. There's no record.
Buyer beware.
That's buyer beware, exactly.
If you guys learn nothing out of today's program, I'm not sure how you say it in Latin. Caveat emptor.
Yeah.
Buyer beware. That's the one thing I hope you take away today as you go to these different Hamfests. Now I'm going to put my glasses back on, Pat, because I'm old. And I want to read you some of the Hamfests around here that are coming up. Now, folks, I'll tell you how to find your own here in just a second. We have a Cleveland Hamfest that is coming up on the 26th of September.
And that's usually a pretty good one. That one there is probably one of the better ones in this area.
Have you been to Berea?
Yeah.
That's the one that's coming up on the 26th. And you can find out about that at HACHotelalphacharlie.org. And then on the of course, we move into October then, of course. The 10th annual Vet City Hamfest is coming up. That is the ARRL, Great Lakes Division Convention. And that's going to be in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So if you want to make a short trip down to Kentucky, not too far away, that's the annual meeting for our area of ARRL. And that's on the 2nd of October. On the 9th of October, there's a Hamfest in Westminster, Ohio. Now, I've heard of that. I don't know where Westminster is. I would have to look it up. The big one in our area is the 31st of October, Halloween. And that's the one in Greene, Ohio, at the Canton Akron Airport. And that is sponsored by the Massillon Club. And then on the 6th of November, can you believe we're close to November? Georgetown, Ohio, the Grant Amateur Radio Club has their Hamfest, the GARC Hamfest. And that's in Georgetown. And then the last one I have here for our area is in December. I don't think of Hamfest as being a December thing, but apparently they are. The FCARC Winterfest is going to take place in Delta, Ohio. Now, this is sponsored by the Fulton County Amateur Radio Club, the Fulton County ARC. So that one is in December. So maybe find some Christmas bargains at that particular Hamfest. So we got lots of exciting things coming up. I see that the ARRL is having their annual meeting in February of this year. I may go because it's down in Florida. That would be a good excuse to go to Florida.
That would be.
February.
Pick me.
Yeah. I'll put you in my suitcase. How will that be?
We can drive down there.
Yeah, you betcha. We go down and enjoy some sunshine for a week.
Doggone right.
That'd be worth it.
I'm ready.
We're out of time, my brother, but this has been a fun one. I hope you get to go to a Hamfest this year. If you haven't been, I hope you'll schedule one and take the time to go. I hope you'll remember the tips that we gave you tonight. I hope you'll find some bargains. Remember what Pat said earlier. Pat said, what is one man's junk is another man's treasure. And so, you don't know what treasures that you might find at your local Hamfest.
Yep. The other thing, don't forget our upcoming Hamfests and the I'm reaching for words here.
The one from the Cuyahoga Falls Club.
Yeah, that Hamfest is next April 9th, and also don't forget the activations for tomorrow. We would appreciate anybody that if you can just check in and find one of the operators in one of the parks, do so. We did this so that...
If you want to check out the information on that, you want to see the bands, you want to get the particulars, go to cfarc.org and hunt it up. What was the link, Pat?
It's CTTF's, or CFARC takes to the park. Or CFARC takes the park is what it's supposed to be.
Sounds good to me.
There's a tiny URL on there that says CTTF.
How many watts are you going to run?
Probably 100.
100 watts?
Yeah, I'm gonna have the radio in the car, so I'm probably gonna bring the 891 too.
Is our QRP friend going to be involved?
Oh yeah, he'll be there.
The guy that has like 80,000 contacts during contests, all done QRP. If you haven't watched that show, look that show up. That's a great show.
94,000.
Yeah, wow, isn't that amazing?
Well, that's lifelong. That's 40 years of broadcasting or radioing.
Still, I think that's fairly incredible.
Yeah.
Try to go through a pileup, even with a linear, and see how that goes at some of these some of these contests. You just can't even hear yourself think during the contest, and he's made all those contacts QRP. Incredible stuff.
All right, Jerry. We'll see you next week. Thanks everybody for listening. We will see you next week, 7-3.
The World According to Elmer on Crooked River Radio. 73, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Crooked River Radio Network.
If you want to hang in and talk, I'll be over in a minute.
Okay.